I remember talking to David Maslanka at Midwest, the last Midwest he actually was attending. And I just, lucky enough, it ended up having dinner with him, just a small group of people. So I got to really pick his brain. But that was one of the things he told me. He's like, I don't feel like I wrote a good piece of music till I was about 40, and that definitely caught my attention. It's like, okay, and he kind of took the same path I did too. And I asked him, because I was kind of contemplating giving up the teaching about that time. And he did the very same thing and moved to Montana. And that was that, and I just kind of asked him about those things. And so, beyond his music, which I love, I just, a lot of his life decisions really resonated with me too. So.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to my next guest, Perrine. Hi, Erin.
Hey, Mark.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Erin, so I'm going to set the stage for everyone. We are middle of May 2020, in the middle of the COVID-19 quarantine. And so we're going to have some of that will be entering our discussion, but I just want to make sure, since these are usually can be done out of time, that people know where we're talking. And so you and I had a nice conversation before we started about all of this, but how are you holding up?
Doing okay. Everyone's healthy, and, we're online school. Mm-hmm. At home here. So as most people are, so definitely some changes in our household, but all in all, can't complain. So.
Erin, I didn't ask you, how old are your kids?
My daughter, oldest daughter, is 12, and I have a son who is turning 8 this weekend.
I see.
And then we have a 9-month-old. So we have the whole spectrum at home right now.
Yeah. So what's that? Middle school, second grade, and infant.
Correct. Yep. My oldest plays trumpet and piano, and she's going into 7th grade. And and my boy plays a lot of golf with me in the summer, and he plays piano. And then we have infant. So we're doing it all over again. So
Erin, let's usually this is the point where I ask you to introduce yourself and ask your bio, but I'm going to actually follow this thread up for a moment, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, in this pandemic, as a music teacher, and I teach 4th through 8th grade kids, we've had some problems getting them to play, getting them to respond, and it's been awkward, this spring. And so we're all kind of thinking about ways we can engage our kids more online in music making. How have your kids done with this? Specifically, your daughter, you said she was a trumpet player.
Well, she's been doing well because I've been playing with her, because she has me at home. So I practice with her a lot.
Sure.
So that certainly helps her. I do worry about the students like her classmates that don't have, someone at home like myself that can teach them. And I've always been the one to kind of teach her. I was a brass player, years ago, it feels like, but I still play trumpet with her. And, so she's been doing well. She's been playing a little bit of smart music now that that's free and available for everybody. That's something that we hadn't even looked at before. But that's been fun for her. And then she's also auditioning for an honor band. So she had something actually who knows if this honor band is going to happen on time, but still she had a deadline to get, a chromatic scale worked up and get 2 etudes worked up. So she actually had things to work on. So that, I think, that was also helpful too, to kind of just focus on that. So
that's terrific.
But yeah, it's definitely it's difficult. So.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a mother the other day who was saying that her son's having problems with motivation, and she was wondering if she should return the saxophone that they're renting, and so I set her up with some online lessons with a college student in the area, and so we'll see if that helps him. But this is this is like where we are right now in instrumental education.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the main thing, because I mean, so much of what we do is just beyond the actual, you know, the notes, but it's those connections, those human connections. And when those are gone, sometimes the motivation to practice, especially for, younger students, quickly disappears. They often don't know how to practice when they're, fourth grade, fifth grade. That's something you have to learn
that's
over
what
time.
I'm really struggling with.
And yeah, so if you had beginners that all of a sudden you had to just let go, I mean, I can't imagine, like how they get by. So,
and I have to be honest, I think smart music's a terrific tool, but it's not a terrific tool for fourth graders. It's just a little bit too demanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't have even really introduced it to my daughter too much younger, I think. But I mean, she enjoys it now. But I mean, she has a very good sense now of time and good control of pitch and, some of those things. Otherwise, it would have been tough. I used it some when I taught, but again, it was only kind of supplemental. I can't imagine just turning a kid loose with it and saying, okay, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you never had a chance to introduce them to it.
Exactly. Yeah. As good as it is, if they didn't have exposure to it before, all of this started, I think that would be quite difficult to say, okay, now it's, and, bravo to them for making it available. But it is tough to learn on your own, I think.
Let's get back to the interview here. Can you introduce yourself for the listeners? I think most people know who you are, but let's just, for those who don't.
Absolutely. Yep. My name is Perrine, and I'm a freelance composer. I also do a little conducting, but primarily composer. And I live in northern Minnesota in the Brainerd Lakes area.
Let's talk about your musical background. So your origin story. How'd you get started in music as a kid?
So I am, let's see. My grandfather was a band director and my dad was a band director. So really didn't have a whole lot of, it was just there. I shouldn't say I didn't have a whole lot of choice, because I actually did. My dad wasn't pushy at all about doing music. It was something that I naturally wanted to do. I mean, I was always the fifth grade kid tagging along to pep band games with my trumpet, trying to play 25 or 6-4 or something, like those are my youngest memories, or just, being in the band room, sorting music, learning how to play drum set, whatever, so it was just always around. So, and I grew up in a small town, about 400 people or so, in northern Minnesota, about 30 minutes actually from where I live now. So, right down the road is where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And, from there, I mentioned I started on piano and trumpet, piano in third grade, and then trumpet I started playing in fourth grade. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of picked up other instruments as I went. I learned guitar in high school. I mentioned drum set, and kind of dabbled with other things too. But those were kind of the primary things that I played growing up. So,
was your dad your band director?
He was 5 through 12. Yeah, the only band director in high school and middle school that I ever had. So, yep.
So this is usually the point where I ask about like influential teachers, but this is a really influential teacher.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to ask about the piano part of this. Did your parents insist on the piano because your dad was a musician, or was that just something that you wanted to do?
I don't recall them insisting on it. No. I do. I definitely insist on it with my kids. But no, it was just something that we had an old, pretty out of tune piano in the house. And my dad didn't play piano. I mean, I took lessons, but he couldn't help me all that much. I mean, he could read the notes for me and stuff, but he couldn't sit down and actually play the music for me after about, a couple of months. It didn't take too long to pass up his piano skills. So, but no, it's just one of those things that I enjoyed. We all played. I have a brother and a sister, and we all played to some extent, but I think I was the one that obviously kind of took it the furthest. And so it was just something I really enjoyed doing. And, very quickly, I think I learned pretty early on, even though I wasn't doing any serious composing in high school, I was always doing little arranging projects or reharmonizing things and, basically learning music theory, what we might call macro analysis. I was doing that. I played piano in high school for the Methodist Church, and I was doing, I found out it was much, much better actually just analyzing the music with chord changes and then playing that, and harmonizing myself rather than learning to read all the notes. It's like, oh, I can learn this in like an hour, or I can, spend more time playing this. So I was always kind of dabbling in all of that stuff. So, I mean, I can see why I went into composition rather than, being a performer.
So you mentioned, we talked about your dad and growing up and your piano background, but what was your dad's band like? What was the high school like?
Well, I mean, again, it was small. So it was one of those things where by the time I was in 8th grade, I was playing with the jazz band. Actually, I think we had 2 for a while, but I was playing already in like the top jazz band as an 8th grader because, it was a small school. And, but I mean, we had a decent group for, we had like, I remember getting mostly superior ratings going to contests and stuff like that. But, it was interesting. I was just thinking about this, and it's like, I didn't even know what an all-state band was when I was a high schooler. Like, I didn't realize what that was until I got to college and was playing next to all-staters. It's like, oh, what is this? What is this all-state business? So it was never like, I was never pushed into music, which I just kind of find interesting, but I just think that's my dad's personality. He's just very laid back. And so, but it was fun. I mean, I dabbled in everything, like I said. And I think that was, for better, for worse, those are the experiences that shape all of us. And, it got me, to where I am today. So,
yeah. And especially as we look at our own kids, I think about that a lot. Like, I asked that piano question, and you mentioned that you have your kids practice. And, I was going to mention that my kids are taking piano lessons as well. And that's sort of a requirement for other music making in our house. We want to encourage them to be in band and choir and orchestra, whatever they want to do, but they have to play piano.
Yeah, that's kind of been my rule too. I mean, I just feel like it's so fundamental to.
It is. It's going to make them better in the long run.
Agreed.
I didn't have that. I didn't come from a musical family, and that I feel like that lack of piano training has I learned as an adult, like most other music majors, and I really wish that I had a better set of piano skills, even though I'm not terrible. It's just not good enough, if that makes sense, Mm-hmm. Like I was just thinking about it today. My improvisation is usually done with voice. I don't really improvise on the piano. I don't know if that's your experience, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically all I still play if I'm playing. Like I did mention, I play a little trumpet with my daughter, but for the most part, I'm not a brass. I don't associate myself with brass instruments anymore. But I do play the piano pretty much every day, and that's where I tend to be the most comfortable composing too, is at the piano. And so, yeah.
So how about after high school? What was the choice for college? And did you always know you were going to be a professional musician? Like, was that something that you knew early on?
Oh, no, I was very reluctant to do that. I always thought I was going to be a lawyer for some reason. I just, thought I'd, go major in political science, or maybe get a business degree and get an MBA or something like that. That always kind of seemed like the way to go for me. But that all kind of changed. And I was looking at completely different schools. The school that I ended up going to wasn't even on my radar, but the University of Minnesota Morris, which is one of the University of Minnesota campuses. And this one is it's only about 2,000 students in this liberal arts college, a public liberal arts college. So it's somewhat unique, I think, in that respect. But they're jazz band, and for 2,000 students at the time, they had 4 big bands, which is pretty incredible. And so their top jazz band was very, very good. And they happened to just need a tour stop between, I don't know, on their way to Duluth or Grand Rapids or something like that, one of the bigger towns in our area. But they needed somewhere to play in the meantime. So they called up my dad, and they're like, hey, you guys care if we come play a concert for you? And, hearing them play Pat Metheny's First Circle, I was just blown away, on the Bob Curnow big band arrangement of it. And I was just like, oh my goodness, like music can be this, where it opens, I don't know if you're familiar with the tune, but it opens, alternates between 12/8 and 10/8. And the entire band claps on just the upbeats. And that's how it starts. And then the piano comes in on the downbeats. And it's just the coolest thing for a 17-year-old kid who thought he knew a thing or two about music to hear something like that, and trumpets ending on high A. It's like, oh my goodness, like blew my mind. So as soon as I heard them play and met with their director, that is where I went to school. I was just impressed with the program. And then their director he was one of Jim Carlson, taught, I don't know, 30 some years, and just a big educational name in Minnesota. So Great guy, great teacher. So, yeah.
Do they still have a strong jazz program at Minnesota Morris?
I don't know as much about it. It's definitely changed. I know they don't have 4 big bands anymore. I know they've changed a little bit. When we were there, we used to go to like Montreux Jazz Fest, North Sea Jazz Fest, some of those things. But it's one of those things where it's a smaller school, and if the program turns over too many times, so I'm really I haven't been to campus in, I don't even know, 5-6 years now at least. So I went there as a trumpet major, and got to spring semester of my freshman year, went to my trumpet lesson with my jazz instructor, Jim Carlson. And there's a trombone waiting for me one day. And I'm like, what is that? Why is that here, Doc? And my embouchure had changed so much, and really had lost that top fifth of my range. And we were kind of working on it that whole year, and it just really wasn't getting better. So he's like, I just want you to try this trombone out and just kind of see how that fits. So I ended up switching to trombone pretty late in the game. And in the interim there, when I didn't really have an instrument that I was very good at, he's like, I think he knew I needed to compose. So he's like, why don't you write a tune for the big band, and minimum, we're going to read it. And if we like it, we'll play it. And he knew what I needed. I mean, before I did. And so I did it, and we performed it, and pretty much every concert from then on out, I'd write a tune for our jazz bands. I don't even know how many tunes, 10 or 12 pieces that, I don't even know where they exist anymore on some old Finale 2000 files somewhere or something. But that's how I got started, is writing. And it was because of opportunity. It wasn't because I necessarily wanted to write jazz. It's because that was how I was going to, hear my music performed. So that was what got me hooked.
Yeah, so Aaron, we are going to come back to the composition thing, but I'm fascinated by this particular switch that you made. What kind of teacher can see that and make that kind of hard decision for their student, even though it's the right decision? I'm fascinated by that.
I don't know. I mean, and, at that age, I just, you trust your teacher and you just go with it. But looking back, it's pretty crazy. I mean, that was, and the crazy thing too, is I ended up playing. He knew I was going to be good enough on trombone. So I was playing in Jazz 1 sophomore year on trombone. I played trombone too. I learned the slide positions, and I was good enough over the summer to come back. And, I remember playing just crazy hard jazz stuff, but, it was like, that was the expectation. That was where the bar was. So it's like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. So
well, that's terrific, actually. I don't mean that to sound negative. I mean, that's a courageous thing as a teacher to make that kind of decision.
Yeah. I mean, he knew what I could do musically, I think, obviously, working with me for that year. So I think he just knew that, it's just one of those things I needed to learn that technique. But, embouchure wise, it was just a way better fit. So I ended up playing trombone 2 for a couple of years, and then ended up playing a lot of bass trombone too. Kind of the lower I went, the better things got for me.
Should have picked up the tuba.
I probably would have been a decent tuba player, but no time for that anymore. So,
I was fascinated by the embouchure change story, but you've been talking about a couple things that have been recurring. One is jazz, and jazz was a really important part of your music education, just by what I'm hearing. Can you describe its influence on you?
Its influence on me. I mean, it's something I was just naturally, I just was drawn to it. I mean, it was something about the music, something about the rhythms. One of my absolute favorite composers is Maria Schneider, and drawn to her music for a variety of reasons. I mean, the colors she uses in the big band, I mean, it's amazing writing. I remember we had the trumpet player Ingrid Jensen out one year for our jazz festival, and she brought all Maria charts with her. And that was my first exposure to Maria. And so I, learned, I don't know how many, 6 or 8 of her tunes. And I mean, that was just so eye-opening. So, I'd studied all of her scores, I got my hands on all of her scores that I possibly could. And so, and the other reason I just loved her is because she's from Windham, Minnesota, another small, tiny town in rural Minnesota. And I'm thinking, if Maria Schneider can do this from a tiny town of 400 people in the middle of nowhere, I mean, I saw some of myself in her in that regard too, so she spent some time at the University of Minnesota, and before, going to New York and doing her thing. So yeah. But yeah, jazz is always just something that I've been attracted to, and something about the rhythmic aspect of it too. I mean, I just, and the the chord changes, just, all the color. And I studied some jazz piano after college. Actually, I spent a few years studying jazz piano, and just really started to, it's one of those things I realized pretty quickly that, okay, I'm not going to ever be good enough at this to do what, legit jazz pianists do, but just studying some of the voicings and understanding that side of the music theory was just, again, eye-opening. And that kind of stuff has just always seeped into my music, I think, and stayed there. Sometimes it's more apparent than others, but it's, other times, but it's always there. So, yeah.
So how about composing in college? You mentioned that was where you found your creative outlet. You started to write for the big band. When did it become certain that was going to be your path, composition?
It wasn't my path yet then. I mean, I did a half recital in composition. I wrote like a bunch of chamber stuff. I wrote a choir piece. My senior year, I wrote a band piece. That was my first piece for band. But I was a music education major. So I wasn't, still wasn't quite sure. At that point, what I really wanted to do was eventually teach music theory at the college levels, kind of was my ultimate long-term goal. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to get there yet, but that was where I wanted to end up at that point. And so I guess after undergrad, my wife, we were married at the time. So my wife was going to attend pharmacy school at the University of Minnesota. So I was either going to teach, but I didn't want to be too far from campus. So that really limited job opportunities, which is tough for a first year teacher to be that limited. And it was a bad job market at the time. Or I guess, so I ended up just applying for the master's program in composition at the University of Minnesota, got accepted. So I started that, just kind of, that was the only place I looked because of proximity. And so I studied there with Judith Zamont. Doug Gears was there at the time, so I studied electronic music with him, and then some like jazz arranging with Dean Sorensen, who's still there. And I got about 1 year into that program, and then I got offered a teaching position that I never applied for. Lo and behold, but someone recommended me for the job. Knew I had the teaching license, and so I accepted because my wife was in school, and that would be a better way to make, so someone was going to make some money. That's a good thing. Money's nice. So I taught for 4 years at Humboldt High School in St. Paul. And to this day, I mean, it still might be my favorite job I've ever had in some respects. It was the hardest I ever worked, though. I mean, I was there all hours of the day. But I didn't have any kids at the time, so it was one of those things that wasn't. And my wife is always studying, so it was fine. But I knew it was not sustainable. I knew I could only. There was definitely a shelf life on that job for me. So I gave it everything I had for 4 years. We had our first daughter then, and then I took a closer to home job at Brooklyn Center High School with a friend. That was a part-time job, so I could be home a little bit more with our daughter. Kind of knowing that I was going to be going to grad school, though, shortly thereafter. That was kind of, almost a transitional year for me to make my way to grad school, because I was already, at that point, probably pushing 30, late 20s. And it's like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do this. And I knew I ended up getting my master's in music education. I finished the degree in music education because I could do that during the summer and, evening classes and that kind of thing. But I really wanted that composition degree. So that was when I started, getting serious about going back to grad school and getting a doctorate in composition. So I went to the University of Iowa for that. So yeah, we kind of had some options, and we ended up wanting to be a little closer to home. And that, that seemed like the best fit for what I wanted out of the degree, because I think that's important to know, kind of going in, schools are so different, and, kind of what you can maybe hope to do with the degrees and who you're going to study with. And for me, that seemed like a really good fit. I knew I wanted to write, by that point, I knew I wanted to write for Wind Ensemble for my dissertation. And I reached out to their band director, Mark Heidel, and he was all for it. I thought, and just had a really great meeting with him. And that seemed like a good option. And I was also offered a theory TA position there. And I had other TA offers at other schools, but Iowa, a lot of the composers, just kind of the way there weren't that many PhD theory majors at the time, and so we often ended up teaching theory there as composers, which was fabulous. But that wasn't necessarily the case at some of the other schools I was considering. So I kind of put all that together, and that ended up being a nice fit for me. So, and it was drivable to get home too. As I mentioned, we had a daughter at the time, just one child at the time, and so it was nice to be able to drive back home to Minnesota. So.
All right. So Aaron, so we know you got your doctorate, and we know that band music is now the focus of your attention with your dissertation. What was the next step? So you had those 5 years of teaching, but what was the next step to kind of becoming, as you describe yourself, a freelance composer? That's a big difference than teaching and composing.
It definitely is. When I graduated, I was ABD, I want to say 2012. It's been a while now. But I still had a few things to tidy up, and I wasn't quite ready to apply for jobs yet. And my wife really didn't want to go all over the country. And it's like, okay, well, she's like, well, why don't you just try composing? So I'm like, oh, that's going to be interesting. At that point I was only getting a few performances a year, so, but I had a few pieces lined up to write. So it was one of those things. So I kind of finished up slowly. But at that time as well, I started teaching at Cornell College, which is in Mount Vernon, Iowa. And very close to Iowa City. So I kind of got hooked up there through my professors and stuff. So I started teaching part-time there, and I thought, this will be great. This will be, foot in the door. This is building my CV. So I did that for a few years, and lo and behold, they ended up having a full-time position open up. So I applied for that. It was the only job I applied for that year, and was accepted. And, so I took that position, and we moved back to Iowa then. So we had moved back to Minnesota at that point. And so we moved back to Iowa for a couple of years. And it's one of those things that my career just really kind of took off, though, as far as, my composing career really took off around that time. Pale Blue and Deep won the Ostwald Award. And then a few years later, Only Light won the Ostwald Award. And Only Light, it was during that second year of full-time, tenure track teaching that Only Light won. And it was just getting to the point then where I went from having a couple of performances a year to having, I don't know how many emails I got that first couple of weeks, people wanting this music that wasn't even on my barely functioning website. I wasn't set up for anything like that yet. So it was one of those things where we just kind of looked at each other, and she really gave me she's like, I think you can write. I think you can just do this. So I went to my dean, and I was just going to resign. And he created a position for me, a part-time position for me, that I could live in Minnesota. So we wanted to move back home closer to family so I could travel more. And they would help out with the kids. And so I was going, but then for, 3 years, I continued to go back and forth to Iowa to teach on a part-time basis. And I did some of it online as well. So I was able to do some of my teaching online, some of my composition lessons online, and kind of did this back and forth thing. So yeah, kind of crazy. So kind of spent the better part of 8 to 10 years, bouncing back and forth between Minnesota and Iowa. So, wow.
And so now you're just settled and you just write full time.
When baby number 3 came, as soon as we found out we were having a third, I knew within 5 minutes I was going to have to let that go. And that was fine. It was kind of the point where that just kind of needed to happen anyways. It was one of those things that it was just getting too busy with the writing. So that was a good reason to just write music. So, I taught my last class, and, I think the spring of 2019. So since then I've been just writing from home. So, yeah.
I tell you, it's so liberating to leave higher education.
It's a crazy deal, and you give up a tenure track job, and, I don't know that there's ever going to be one for me again. If, it's hard to know, because the way that world is going right now, mm-hmm. So, but that's fine. I was comfortable with that decision, and still am today. I'm really enjoying, the freedom. I loved teaching, but I didn't love all the meetings and all the other things. It was just, I had a free hour here, a free hour there, but never enough time, I felt, to really sit down and write. I'm
a
getting rid of that was nice.
My wife and I are dual academic couple, and so I gave up a full-time job to come to St. Louis with her because she got a tenure track job.
Okay.
And so I kind of did the adjunct thing for years, a long time in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And I had a visiting assistant job in town, and then that went to someone else because I'm not a jazz musician, so that went to a jazz person, which is fine.
Sure.
Just wasn't meant for me.
Yep.
And rather than go back to being part-time college, I took this job teaching kids 4th through 8th grade, and it's just been so liberating. It's just been wonderful.
Yeah, I feel like I know a few people that have done that. They've taught college for quite a few years, and all of a sudden now they're teaching elementary music. And
it's just, there's just something really refreshing about it. I love teaching college. I love like sort of the depth of information and sort of the discourse. I love that.
Yep, and I do miss that a little bit. That certainly, now I have to kind of create that for myself. I feel like, I have to make sure that I continue to score study on my own and.
What I really love, though, about the younger kids is there's just such an honesty and an earnestness about them. There's a visceral music making that's, when you teach freshman theory long enough, that it becomes an exercise in cynicism at a certain point. Mm-hmm. Just because the kids get ground down a little bit because it's hard.
Yeah.
And,
no, it definitely is. So.
You don't get that with 4th grade beginners. They're just happy to be playing an instrument. They just think it's cool that they get a clarinet.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, it's been really refreshing for me, energizing. So, yeah.
And lucky kids that they get someone at the doctor teaching them too. I mean, just
it's fun. They're cute.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I just got an email the other day from a little girl. She's like, "You're the best band teacher ever," as if she's ever had another band teacher. Uh-huh. That's awesome. And she's like, "You make jokes with us and we learn so much." And it's like, "Oh, I never got that from a college student."
Right. You didn't have that in your evals, Mark?
Yeah, no. Well, I had some nice ones, but sure. Often they weren't that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Aaron, let's talk about your experience as a high school band director and how that informs your work as a composer. What was that experience like teaching high school, and how have you carried it with you?
It definitely informed my compositional career, certainly writing for Winds, being on the podium every day and looking at other people's music and finding out very quickly what works and maybe what doesn't work as well when you actually put it in front of the students. And, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that I learned probably just as much teaching, with that in mind, because I was already writing, I was starting to get, kind of smaller commissions at the time and, writing for basically, a lot of people I went to school with, and then it slowly started branching out from there, that kind of thing, But I think I learned just as much, at least in those days, that's what I needed to learn, is that very, practical, like, okay, this is a good way to score this. This is, this rhythm is going to be challenging, all of those types of things. So really just a hands-on, kind of lab experience, if you will, every day.
No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. So did you, when you were teaching high school, did you have the full run? Did you do marching band, concert band, the whole bit?
No, not where I taught. No, we definitely didn't have any kind of budget for that, nor the students. I taught in a very urban, lots of turnover as far as just directors. I was probably there longer than, quite a few people actually. It was just, it was one of those places that was a powerhouse back in like the 50s or something like that. But, when I inherited the group, I didn't really know what I was walking into. And had I known, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. But like I said, it ended up being, one of my favorite jobs ever, just because the kids were, once you got them hooked, they were just so, kind of like you were talking about earlier with your students. They were just so into the music making process, and they were just so invested. Once you got them there, they were, earning their trust was certainly a thing, but once I was able to do that, it was a lot of fun. So, but no, I know nothing about marching band. I went to a rural small school, so we didn't do any kind of marching band there. Went to a small college, didn't march, and then I taught at a school that had no marching. So yeah, don't ask me about marching band.
Another similarity we share.
Yeah.
I'm often apologizing to the listeners of this show for my lack of marching band knowledge. I did it in high school. I did it a little bit in college, but then it ended.
Yeah. I can appreciate it. It's pretty impressive stuff, but it's like, I don't know the first thing about teaching it or,
Yeah, right. I look at that. It's one of the reasons why I don't think I'd want to go back to teaching high school. I mean, not that I couldn't learn how to do it, do it, but I'm not sure I want to at this point. I kind of like the young middle school or younger grades. But yeah, that's a different conversation. So Aaron, I'm assuming you're self-published. Do you have any commercially published works?
I do. My first few are published with CL, and I believe I have 4 with them from like 15 years ago or something like that. So, because at the time that just kind of seemed like the thing to do, and I was just so excited that someone wanted to publish my music because it's great. I have a piece called April that still gets a ton of play. It was like a finalist or something in the Tekeli competition, and that was one of the things kind of early on that started getting my music out there. So so that was super helpful. So it might have been the best deal actually to have some pieces that were published first, just to kind of get my music out there in some way, shape, or form. Because otherwise, if you self-publish, they have to kind of know where to find you. And I think it's getting easier and easier with social media, but that was back in 2005. I don't even know if Facebook was hardly around or anything, back then. So that was a good way at least to get some of my music out there. But as far as like making a living on that, I was quickly realizing that was not at all, I wasn't going to write enough music to make that work, I guess, put it that way. So.
Right. And yeah, well, this is the way it is with published music. I mean, to really make a living as a published composer, you have to have a large number of works that are all trickling in a little bit of income every year. Mm-hmm. It's what Robert W. Smith calls the long tail, right? You want to write a piece that has a long tail because they start to add up.
Yep.
And he was someone he's someone who would know that as a published composer. So I know that, we're going to kind of dive into some of these issues here. And I know that you're friends with Tyler and you guys have shared a booth at Midwest. And, Tyler's whole thing is he writes his young band music with Brian Ballmages at FJH, and his older band music he's now self-publishing. Was that ever a model that you considered, or was it always just once I'm out of the publishing world, I'm going my own way?
No, not for me. That was... once I was decided to make the break, that's for better or for worse, that's, what I decided to do. So I learned I didn't like giving up the control and the, besides the fact that, the standard kind of 10% is just not enough to make a living on. I didn't like losing the control of the copyright and, just having that, so for me, self-publishing just seemed like, the way to go once I kind of started seeing like that was a viable option. So
Sure. And can you talk to me about the nuts and bolts of your self-publishing? Do you do your own printing? Do you do your own mailing?
No, I kind of knew early on that because I was teaching for quite a while. So I knew early on that I didn't want to take that on. So I used to work with Black Ribbon printing for many years. Matt Franco, they do phenomenal work. But I just about a year ago now, I want to say, switched over to Sean Murphy does my printing now. And he doesn't do any publishing. He does kind of a variety of things for people. He publishes for people and kind of everything in between, I feel like, which is great. The best thing about working with Sean is he's super flexible and he's just all about getting the music out there in whatever way you want to get it out there. So it's one of those things. He reached out to me and, had been for many years actually. And finally I saw that he had enough people, because switching your catalog over to, it's just a lot of work. So I wanted to make sure he was really in it and, not going to go under anytime soon. So, but I started to see the roster he was putting together. It's like, okay, he's doing good work. Time to really talk to him about this. And one of the main reasons I did is because he's more connected in the band world. I thought that just made more sense because Matt, like I said, Matt does great printing, but I don't know that he's as connected in the band world. And I do a lot of my work, obviously, for Winds. So just seemed like a good logical move. And and actually, last year at Midwest, we kind of had like a mega booth there.
Yeah, I remember.
Our friends from Blue Dot and then Sean right in the middle there, because he works with most of us in one way, shape, or form. So
Yeah, no, there's a lot of folks working with Sean right now. That's Murphy Music Press, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So for me, he just prints, because at that point, I kind of already had my own website established, and my own presence and everything. So I wasn't looking for a publisher, but I thought, someone, a new printer is, certainly something I could consider. So, Yeah, but I don't do the mailing. He does everything goes straight out from him, and he prints it and mails it to either to schools directly if they're buying, which is the preferred route because you're going to get your music faster. And then there's no middleman to worry about. But otherwise, he'll send it to Pepper or, whatever music store might be purchasing it to, because, some schools honestly have to go that route, as especially middle schools or high schools, they have a hard time selling to, someone like myself.
Oh yeah. It's better to be in a catalog too. You reach more people, and in schools, like you said, they can go through Pepper and get the purchase orders that they need. Sometimes when they have to order it from you individually, they can't. Yeah, I know there's a whole lot of reasons.
So people can find my music on Pepper and get it that way too. So so there's lots of different ways to get your hands on it, but the fastest is typically through me, because then it's just going to go straight out to, from Sean, who is very quick. He usually gets it out within 24 hours. So yeah.
Excellent.
And I have now just lately, for about the last year, my sister, her name's Kara Gelker, and she has been this has been such a weight lifted off my shoulders. But so if you ever, email us on my website, you'll probably get a response from her right away if it's about music. So she kind of handles the day to day and coordinates things with Sean and kind of gets that going, so I don't have to respond to those, because I found that was it's one of those things. It was just, I can do it, but I don't like doing it. And it just gets to, it takes all the, I just feel like it takes all the joy out of doing what I do when I have to stop and, deal with a purchase order or something like that. And she's great at doing that stuff, and she loves working with spreadsheets anyway. So that ended up being a good deal to bring her on to help me out with that part of things. So allows me to have more time to write.
So, Aaron, I kind of have two questions for you related to your time as a conductor and combined with your time as a composer. One is, do you have any advice for anyone out there who might be listening, a band director who is beginning to write music or is thinking about getting into composing in a more serious way?
Does it have to be a band director? Or?
No, it could be anybody, but most of my listeners are band directors.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I guess I'll just kind of give the same advice that I would give, that I would give my composition students. I mean, I always tell them they have to listen. As a younger composer, I just think it's so important to know what's out there to the best of your abilities, and just to kind of take in the landscape, and listen to then, with a score in hand, preferably. I'm blanking on his name right now, but there was one of my professors in my master's program had a saying, first wow, then how. And that always stuck with me. I thought that's brilliant. First wow, then how. So the idea is, just, you have to be kind of, just impressed, something just to blow you away, the orchestration, the melody, whatever it is, the textures, but then get the score out and figure out what that looks like on the page. Cause I know for a fact I was always, I usually expect to see, I expected something different on the page, put it that way. And then when I looked at the score, I'd be like, wow, okay, that's how you do that. Okay. And then it's kind of this back and forth thing, and you get better at hearing a certain texture or certain color or whatever. And you get a little better at kind of, training your ear to hear what that actually, and to imagine what that might look like, from a lot of that's orchestration. I would get familiar with Elaine Gould's book Behind Bars, if they're not, because presentation is very, very vital. I mean, even stuff that I wrote 5-6 years ago, I think, man, I could, that could look better. That score could look better. So, that's on my to-do list one of these days, to go back and re-engrave that. So, I mean, but I'm always working to make my music look as good as I possibly can. So I'm not wasting anybody's time in rehearsal, and, cause you want to get to the music making as fast as you can. And especially as someone, if you're not established yet, if you give, say you call in a favor and you get someone to actually read your music, if your music doesn't read well, it might be a great piece, but they're probably not going to, it's probably not going to continue. They're going to put it away. So I think that's really important. And I always, I feel like I'm spending half my time in composition lessons with my students, or when I was teaching full time, talking about presentation and talking about these issues and like how do we get your idea on the page in the cleanest way possible. So Gould's book is one that is definitely used a lot. There's other books too out there, like How to Write for Percussion by Solomon. Textures and Timbres by Brandt. There's some of those types of books too, not specifically talking about presentation, but some of those books were always on my required, you must have these if you're gonna study here kind of thing. So just so they're all on the same page with me. So get out your, it was just on the syllabus and stuff. So
yeah, I can see my Solomon book right now from where I'm sitting.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, the Gould is like it's always on my desk. It's like, and I didn't find that for years. It's like, it's like, oh, if I would have known about that when I was your age, but that's okay. Let's see. What else? I mean, some other things that I used to do a lot. Have you ever heard of the program called Variations Audio Timeliner?
No.
So I use that, and I use that with my students. And I use that for kind of talking about pacing of music, because I really think the way it moves through time is so important, right? Because I feel like when I'm working with younger composers or if I'm looking at my own music, that's one of the things I'm always thinking about is, does this work from a pacing point of view? Is this idea, are the listeners going to get bored with this? Is this too short? For a long time in my own music, what I found is that the idea actually was too short. I didn't really let it develop and breathe, and I think that's because I might tend to get bored with the material because I've been like living with it for weeks, right? But you got to remember the listener only is going to get one time with it, at least. Initially, hopefully they'll listen again and you get multiple performances. But Variations Audio Timeliner is a program that you can drop like an MP3 file into this program, and you can kind of graph out, kind of like using bubbles, so you can visually see the form very, very quickly. But it's using the proportions, in real time, in 45 seconds. This is 30 seconds, if that kind of makes sense. So that was always a very useful tool to do with my students. They might export the MIDI file and then drop it in there. And then we could actually very quickly kind of analyze, like, hey, you're doing this for this long. And they could see like, oh, wow, I really do need to spend more time developing that. Look how short that is. And another thing you can do is find a piece of, I'd always challenge them to find a piece of music that you like, kind of in the style that you're writing, and find something that you feel that really is just the music is perfectly paced, right? It's just inevitable, like there's surprises, but it leads you in these directions. It's just perfect in every way. Find those pieces of music and then map out how, on a clock, how it looks. And, I think when you first start doing that, you might be surprised at, how long you can actually spend, with this particular idea and, that kind of thing. So that's one thing I used to do.
What advice would you give to directors who might want to reach out to you to commission a work or have something written for them?
That's pretty simple. I mean, feel free to contact me through my website, and for me, the commissioning process is very straight ahead. Usually just do like a simple 1-page contract kind of thing, unless, more is needed for some reason. But, and then it's just a matter of, there's certainly just, no matter who you contact, just be aware, if you're not aware, that there's typically a waiting period. So it's one of those things that good planning is going to result in a better piece for everyone involved. I think I write my best music when I have more time to think about the piece, even if I'm not writing a piece, I know, in 6 months I'm going to be writing this piece or whatever, or a year I'm going to be writing this piece. I know I'm already working on that piece in the back of my mind. So, just, and then kind of just talking through some of those things as far as like bringing, I think sometimes people don't remember that, hey, you should really bring out the composer and budget money for that too, because that's a really important part of the part of the whole process, right? And during the commission is to bring a composer out and stuff like that. So that's sometimes directors don't always think of that when they're thinking of writing commissioning music. They think of what's the piece going to cost, but there are some other costs involved too. You got to get a plane ticket, you got to get food, you got to get X, Y, and Z. So, but yeah, as far as just reach out to me, and be happy to talk. So,
remember your first term of teaching, learning all the skills that you don't get taught in music school, managing a transitioning culture in your classroom, finding out that you have to teach guitar this term? During those early years, we found out that leaning on a community of music educators was important, not only for building that knowledge in ourselves, but also maintaining enough sanity to serve the students right in front of us. Amused is a podcast centered around a community of music teachers. Between the four of us, we teach choir, band, orchestra, general, jazz, and marching band at the elementary through collegiate levels. We certainly don't have all the answers, but you're welcome to listen in while we try to find them. Join us while we work through the challenges of music teaching and celebrate the joy of bringing music making into the lives of young people. In each episode, you'll hear stories, both good and bad, about that week of teaching, and we'll try and tackle an issue that one of us is struggling with. Something we're all taught is that music brings people together, but being the only teacher in your subject at a site can be really isolating. We think everyone ought to be a part of a community, and you're welcome to come join ours. Episodes come out on Wednesdays during the school year, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and at amusedcast.org.
All right, are you ready for the final group of questions?
I'm ready as I can be, man.
All right, so the first of these questions is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Okay, the fun questions, right? Well, I mean, when I think of competition, I often think of like marching band and stuff. And as we talked about earlier, that I had really no experience in that. So, but just competition in general. I mean, it's hard to imagine a world without competition, in some way, shape, or form. I think we're all kind of competing with ourselves. I mean, primarily is that's where I tend to direct it. And when I was teaching, that's where I really wanted my students is I wanted to appeal to their intrinsic motivation, rather than kind of putting student versus student. I just think that having a collaborative environment was the direction I tended to fall, I guess. I'm not opposed to competition because I think it can result in some good musical things. I think it gets unhealthy when students feel paralyzed, or this idea of winning, whatever that means, becomes more important than the music itself. So I guess if there's a line there, that's kind of where it is for me. So.
All right, Aaron, this is the question that no one's able to answer.
All right.
How do you achieve a work-life balance in a career as a musician?
Yeah, exactly. I'll let you know when I get there. But the way I've tried to do it is, every few years, I kind of have to assess where I'm at and try to figure out what's working, what's not. And then I think don't be afraid to make a change. As we spoke about earlier, I quit teaching. And part of that was because I just didn't have time to do it all well or to the best of my abilities. I have 3 kids, as we talked about. I have, and that being a dad is very important as well to me, and being a husband is important to me. So trying to balance family, teaching, and composing, and then all the travel that comes with the composing, it ended up being just too much. So it was one of those things where, okay, what can go, and so it was, the teaching was, the thing in that case. And so, but I mean, I think those are the questions you have to ask yourself every so often, because careers change over time. Right. At some point the kids are going to get bigger and they're maybe, not going to need dad around as much, and so maybe I'll have more time. Maybe I'll want to teach again someday. It's not that I don't like teaching at all. It's just that, I couldn't imagine life without composing. So that was the kind of the reason I had to give it up for the time being. So, but yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give you to that, to that one.
That's a good answer. I mean, I like the idea of reflecting every couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, cause it's amazing, 2, 3, 4 years, life changes so much, so, I mean, look where we are right now.
It sure does. It sure does.
Yeah.
We're getting, as you said, we're getting an object lesson on that right now.
Exactly. So I think those things are really important, and, being home this whole time has made me realize, I kind of like being home. Parts of it. I do miss the travel, but maybe I don't need to travel quite that much. Maybe it's good to be here for, because I've missed a lot of band concerts already and stuff. They always seem to fall during Midwest and, that kind of thing. Not that I'm going to skip Midwest, but, just to give you an example. So.
All right, Aaron, this is a big question. What are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
Well, yeah, that's a huge question. I'm not sure if I have the answers to how to best meet them, but I think we're all aware, hopefully, of how do we diversify our programming. I think that's one specific to music education that we are trying to address right now, and that I'm happy that the conversations are being had. We have a lot of work to do there. But people like, Jody Blackshaw is doing some wonderful work there with her colorful music. Rob Deemer, some people like that come to mind. I just actually jumped on Jody's webpage because she came to mind when I first read this question earlier today when I was kind of going through them. And this is great. She has full of global colors, full of gender diversity, full of different generations, and full of respect for all nationalities. And so those are some of the things that, that should be thought about when programming, and representing all of these different people. That's the main thing. It's, so how do we fix it? That's how we fix it. Easier said than done. I think we need to, then continue to strive for more diversity in composition studios, and even take that to younger students, right? How do we encourage everybody to compose if we want diversity in composers, so, but yeah, so that's certainly one of the big things, and then kind of tied to that, not so much music education, but just this idea of the opportunity gap, and kind of the differences in test scores and achievement, that historically have happened between students of different races, and also with students of different income levels. And I experienced that when I taught in St. Paul, very much firsthand. And, you see it at such a young age even. And kind of comes down to some of the same things as, how do we fix that representation in teachers? So, like in St. Paul, when I taught there, it was primarily a white, teaching faculty. But that wasn't the makeup of our student body whatsoever, so we need to have a more diverse teaching population is one. Curriculum and standards need to be thought about. A lot of those are biased. There's some of those things. And then of course, funding, how do we better fund? There's the haves and the have-nots, there's, I was where I taught, there wasn't a lot of money. Where I went to high school, I was at a rural school, there wasn't a lot of money. So it's like, how do we make things more equitable? And I think just continuing to have this conversation when we're working with, I used to work a lot too with music education students, and continuing to have these conversations with future music teachers and future teachers in general. To how do you think about diversity and equity in your curriculum? I think those are conversations that we need to continue to have, and we're not there yet, but I'm happy to see that we are at least making a push in that direction. So
I've invented a time machine, and I set it for the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you telling yourself?
Work hard. And so you're ready for when those opportunities that you can't predict kind of fall in your lap, I guess. So you're prepared for those because those kinds of things will happen if you're kind of seeking them out, and so, but just work hard so you're prepared. Be patient, definitely. There's music that hopefully I'll be able to write someday. Now that I'm 41, I feel like there's music I can write now that there's no way I could have written when I was 18 or 20, because I just didn't have those life experiences. and be patient with your career. I think that's really important too. I've always looked at I want to get to here, but really started to just try to embrace where I'm at right now and be just more aware of the present. Because the present's pretty darn good. I'm very happy with, but I've part of the reason I've kind of gotten to at least where I've gotten to is because I've always had what's the next step? What's the next step? So kind of how do you balance that? So it's kind of what I'm thinking for that question. So.
Yeah, Julie was really good about this. When we had our 4-hour marathon conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put much of that conversation on the episode, but she was really good about this. It takes years and years. And she talked about coming back to the band community, and she won Emmys and,
Yeah.
did orchestration in Hollywood and, wrote on North and South. But it took her years to kind of become famous in the band community. And she was really interesting about that. She was
crazy.
She said it too, you can't go to Midwest your first year and expect to have a piece played. You may not be able to go your 10th year and have a piece played.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it took me years, and every time I get a piece played there, it's just like a huge deal because it just doesn't happen that often, it's crazy. But I mean, I always look at Steve Bryant's career and that's the career, because he's I don't know, 8 or 9 years older than me or something like that, that's the career I really want. I feel like it's just been this slow, steady, just a little bit, better. I don't want to be a flash in the pan. It's I want to do this,
All right, Aaron, if you could somehow plan this out, what would be the final work that you'd like to conduct or hear or perform, and why?
Okay, there's no way I'm going to choose one. So I made you a list of a few things here. So I'm cheating already. I considered, Ligeti, John Luther Adams. I love John Luther Adams' music. Just the expanse, he thinks on a big scale, and I love that about him. Jennifer Higdon was someone I just really respect her music. But I think I'm going to go with these ones. I think this kind of best sums up kind of my musical different directions that I'm into. So Maria Schneider's Winter Morning Walks. Do you know that? I don't know if you know that one.
No, I don't.
It's Don Upshaw and the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, I believe. And she sets Ted Kuzer's poetry, which I just love his poetry. He's probably my favorite poet. Just every time I hear that music, it just makes me think of home. I would listen to it over and over on these long drives back and forth from Minnesota and Iowa. And then to hear Ted Kuzer's poetry, because he is from Iowa and he still lives in Nebraska. So it screams Midwest. So to me, I just love that whole album. I would throw Bon Iver's 22 a Million in there. Love Bon Iver, big fan of them. But getting into some classical stuff, I'd say maybe Brahms Intermezzo, Opus 118, number 2 in A major, would be up there for sure. It's just the way Brahms was able to develop, from the first measure, just limited material. And from a teaching, I used to teach that. I used to teach that piece every year in theory because it literally has, for undergraduate theory 4 kind of stuff, it literally has every type of chord that you study. It was a great teaching piece too, but it's just, so beautiful. So, and if we're thinking band, I'd probably look at Michael Colgrass, Winds of Nagual, or David Maslanka's A Child's Garden of Dreams. Winds of Nagual, it's just the colors and the textures. I mean, it's never really big and loud, it's just such an interesting piece of music, I think. And A Child's Garden of Dreams, that's one that I used to listen to. I remember first hearing that when I was about 20, I don't know, maybe 20, and it just blew my mind. So that one is always just kind of stuck with me. And I love a lot of pretty much all of David's music. It's just every time you hear a couple measures of it, you just know it's David's music. So I decided to choose that one of his repertoire. So how about that for cheating on that question?
I'll allow it. The Brahms is a good choice. I don't think
man.
anyone's chosen any one of the Intermezzi, and I love those pieces. His short piano music is terrific.
And it's when he wrote it too. He wrote that at the end of his life, and it's so reflective. I mean, that's also, to me, that's like the sentimental, cool thing of that is when he composed that music, and it just always, I'm learning to play that one right now. During this whole stay-at-home time, I thought, I need to feel what this voice leading feels like under my fingers. So I've been just like 15 minutes a day, just very slowly. Got the first page learned so far, almost the first A. It's nested ternary form, so I got almost the first A worked up. So it's just brilliant writing.
So how about a work by Aaron Perrine that you would recommend for people who don't know your music? What would you want them to start with?
It's like choosing a child.
I know.
Well, probably the most played work of mine is Only Light. And that would probably be a good one to start with. One I'm proud of that I have recently written is my saxophone concerto. It has to be beautiful. So that would be another one if you wanted to check that one out too. Maybe I'd go that direction. So, but yeah, that's tough.
All right, Aaron, we are in the midst of pandemic, and so it's a little difficult to answer this question. But is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Right? Boy, oh boy. Well, I could go backwards and promote things that happened very recently before the world shut down. I have a piece of mine speaking of pieces that I am proud of, I'm really proud of a piece called Life Painting that was just premiered at Midwest by Wando High School. So I think that would be a neat one to check out. It was intended to be a grade 2. I don't think it's probably a grade 2. It's more of a grade 3, certainly. However, it's only 3 minutes long. And what I think is cool about this is the percussion is out front and center on the stage, at least the snare, tam-tam, and suspended cymbal, if I recall. Yes. And they are all playing with brushes, hence Life Painting. And I'm asking them to play more melodically. So a lot of times they're playing with the woodwinds and stuff, and they're playing a phrase rather than, this dun, 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 this rhythmic type of thing that I feel like is found in a lot of music for middle school, young high school bands. So I wanted to challenge them in a completely different way in that respect. So I think I'm hoping that once this piece, once people are playing music again someday, that it'll be also played by, college groups and stuff too, that are looking for, something like that won't push them so much technically, but hopefully push them, in a coloristic way and stuff like that. So that's one to check out. I just had a piece called And Sings the Tune Without the Words, was premiered at North Central CBDNA, and very meaningful piece for me. It was commissioned by Jason Nam and his wife, Melissa. And if you don't know Jason, he is one of the band directors at Indiana University. I believe he's been on your show, right? Yeah. So Jason. But that piece was written in honor of their daughter, who passed away within about 24 hours of being on this earth, sadly. So they commissioned the work in honor of her. And the unique thing about that piece is it actually started as a choral piece. Because as I mentioned earlier, I'm really into text, and I just thought to tell her story, the best I felt like I could do it, I needed text. I wanted text. So I kind of came back to them and said, well, what would you think of me writing a choral piece first and then transcribing it for winds? Not what they proposed, of course, but they graciously, they went along with the idea. They loved it, and they chose the text. It's Emily Dickinson. And so I wrote the choral version first, and that did get canceled. That premiere was supposed to happen at Redlands University this spring. So that's where Jason and Melissa both went to undergrad. So hopefully in the fall, but I don't know that that's going to happen. It'll be premiered at some point, so when life is more back to normal. So, but the band version was premiered, and so that would be one to check out. The piece I was writing right as things kind of went crazy. And the title is pretty fitting. The title is The Long Light After Time. And it's a Ursula Le Guin poem. And that piece was being written for Michigan State University, commissioned by Ars Golden for their 150th. So each band was commissioning a work, and that was the Ars's band commissioned me for that work. So that piece is, I quit writing it right around March 15th when everything kind of shut down. I just didn't have it in me anymore. So, but that's the piece that I'm going to go back to very, very soon to work on. So, and then down the road, I'm kind of going to switch gears here a little bit. I'm really looking forward to this project. Going to write a piece for Gila Plitman and commissioned by Paul Popiel at the University of Kansas. And that's going to be a pretty substantial work with some large, with a wind ensemble of but a lot of it's going to be, I'm thinking movements or actually even individual songs will be with a chamber group and probably some electronics and just kind of going a different direction. I haven't visited electronic music in maybe 10 years. So that's something, I'm looking forward to getting back into. So just a different side of me, a different way to explore textures and colors and stuff. So, and that's going to be a couple years down the road, but I'll be starting that next year. So yeah.
Excellent. So you did have some things to share. That's good.
Oh yeah, I got stuff going on. It's just been doing some online schooling with the kids right now, but yeah, absolutely.
Man, I think I might mow my lawn tomorrow.
I was thinking the same thing. Mine's looking like it's ready. So.
That's kind of where my head's at the moment. It's like, what do I need to do today? Much less, I don't really think much ahead anymore. It'll come back. All right. Aaron, how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, that's really easy. It's aaronperrine.com. Just jump on my website and find send me an email right there. Like I said, if it's music related, you might end up getting a response back from my sister first, Kara Gelker. But if it's anything else, she sends them right to me and I will read them quickly and get back to you. Otherwise, social media, you can find me easily on Facebook and Instagram. So.
Excellent. Aaron, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with anybody tonight. But it's been so much fun to speak with you, Mark. It was a great conversation. So.